Good evening. Oh, yep. Right out of the gate, screwed it up. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Okay. Yep. All right. This is good. Audio check before we get too far in. Please let me know if it's good or not. And I will say, I'm struggling a little bit right now. I had a mean headache, borderline migraine, settled in about an hour ago that I'm still kind of fighting off the remnants of. So I apologize if I'm not completely coherent. I'm going to do my best, but boy, I tell you, I almost canceled. I just didn't want to at the last minute because again, it was about an hour ago that it settled in. But we're gonna do the best we can and hope for the best. I should not be reading that yet. Whew, all right, that's good to know. All right, yeah. Tonight we're talking about reading sonar or understanding how to read your sonar, understanding sonar in general, your fish finder, all that stuff. That's what we're going to cover tonight. And I'm solo tonight because it didn't make sense to have anybody else on with me for this because it's just a lot of, single interpretation for what everything is. And I do think I'm better at that than most. So nothing against anybody else. It was easier to do this solo this time around. So that is why Andrew's not with me tonight. But I'm sure next week we'll have a topic that both of us can talk on. DJ, miss you too, buddy. You should tow your boat down to Connecticut with us next weekend. That'd be great. Should. Before we get started, do me a favor for anybody that has not done so yet. Please leave a like on the stream, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Doesn't matter. Helps immensely. And I appreciate those that do. And for those that did share the stream, prior to it starting, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I do need to make it a point to ask that a little bit more often because every time I do, you guys always come through and there's a ton of support and it means the world to me. So I really appreciate everybody that does that. I'm going to try and keep this as straightforward as possible. And I know there's probably going to be a lot of questions, but I want to try and save the questions until I get towards the end. I don't know how long this is going to take because I know I can elaborate in different areas much longer than I originally thought it was going to take me to do it. So I want to make sure that I get through everything in well under an hour. And then, after that, then I'll go back through and I'll answer more questions. I'll try and pull stuff up. One of the other things is at a certain point, it's going to get a little bit slow with trying to get images up because I am limited to the number of images I can kind of preload and save on StreamYard to pull up. So do the best that we can when we get to that point, but I'll be able to go through traditional sonar, your down imaging, and then side imaging before I have to start pulling up other things for the 360 imaging and forward-facing sonar. Now that we are well and truly underway, I would say now this is a good time to start, but one last thing before I do go there, I did see Dropman. I see your comment. I'm debating going down there Sunday. It's either there or Candlewood, so we'll see. One way or another, I'll be somewhere down there on Sunday, and I am very excited. Okay, understanding the world of sonar, understanding how to read sonar, what it is your fish finder is telling you, no matter how you want to put it, like that's what we're going to try to do tonight. I want to explain some things first before we go into screenshots and start going down it. I have a lot of screenshots, everything through side imaging, and then a lot of the forward-facing stuff are all images that I've created myself, mostly this past weekend, and then some other stuff. Forward-facing sonar, I have a couple of videos that we're going to go through. It's kind of hard to really explain through just still imagery. But then there's some other things I just pulled from the internet, like especially for 360 imaging. I did not have a memory card in my Helix to be able to pull my own screenshots, so I had to borrow some from the internet. But we're going to go through and explain briefly all the variants of the sonar that are available out there, explain frequencies, and then I'll go through every single one individually, kind of starting with the bare bones basics, your traditional sonar, and working away from there. My name on here. Oh yeah, Alec, what'd you do to your name? Now you distracted me. All right. So what are all the variants of sonar? In this case, this pretty much covers everything to the best of my knowledge. You have your traditional 2D sonar, which is what everybody has ever used if you've ever used a fish finder. That is the bare bones basics, where it is just a straight up and down pinging, and it is constantly refreshing the page or your view to a point where it's almost looks like it's kind of live drawing, but it's just layer of image upon layer upon layer upon layer over and over and over again. And it just continuously cycles through. That's your traditional 2D sonar. Beyond that, you have down imaging, which tends to be a much higher frequency and gives you a much crisp, more detailed image, but it is still a top down 2D sonar. Down imaging, it is just straight up top down viewing. The only way you're gonna be able to pick something up on this is if you're driving over it or really close to it, depending upon the cone size of the cone, the frequency you're using, which dictates the cone size. I will get into that. From down imaging, then you go to side imaging, and that is aptly named because it just shoots straight out to the sides from the center point of the transducer that is giving you your side imaging. All the biggest players out there, they all have this technology. Really, the only player we kind of get into that really owns it completely on their own is the next step, where you have 360 imaging. Now, I will say Humminbird with their 360 and then their Mega 360 imaging, they are not the sole players in this. Lowrance also has 360 imaging. That's kind of a feature that's built in with, if you have the side imaging transducer on your Lowrance Ghost, it will spin itself 360 back and forth and draw a 360 degree image. For all intents and purposes, it is essentially the same, but for me, I don't really consider it the same, only because you have now removed the ability to use your trolling motor. And unless you're dead still, you're not going to get a perfect image, versus when you are spot locked and then use your Mega 360 as its own standalone transducer, you are more often than not always going to get a crystal clear image. So they are essentially the same, but they are on two very different levels of overall capability and ease of use. Which brings us to the last thing, which is our forward-facing sonar, your live sonar. You have Humminbird Mega Live, you have Lowrance Active Target, you have Garmin Live Scope, which started out as Panoptics. They were kind of the originators in that freshwater fishing realm, and everybody started following suit after that. We're going to get into that. Chris Curtis, are you talking about fish finders? Essentially, yes. Your fish finder is your multi-function display, MFD for short, where you have not only your fish finding capabilities on there, at least it's displaying what your transducer is actually reading for both fish and bottom composition, but it is what we're talking about is what is being displayed on your fish finder, your sounder, whatever you want to call it. They're all appropriate and accurate. So that's all the different sonars. Now, one last thing I want to talk about before we start going into images is frequencies. And that's something that I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around, but it actually is pretty straightforward. So you have your low frequencies. Well, let me back it up even a step further. I would say probably the most common frequencies on the most common transducers is your 5200 or 83200. And those are two different frequencies, and they're all in kilohertz. And it's either 50 kilohertz / 200 kilohertz or your 83 and 200 kilohertz. That tends to be the more common that I think that we would see inside of bass fishing. Think of frequency like a flashlight, like the big old mag light, right? The higher frequency you go into, it's almost like taking your mag light and twisting it. So you got that really bright focal point that gets you, like you can see really, really easily exactly where it's pointed. And in lower frequency, it's like twisting the mag light the other way, and you're spreading your light out over a much larger area. That is frequency in a nutshell as far as what it can see. Now, that's just overall detail. Then you get into the other side of frequency and how it's related to power. Higher frequency is technically less power because you have more attenuation, which is more of the power dispersion and scattering kind of with the frequency as it's going into the water. And in a higher frequency, you tend to have more of that attenuation, so you don't get as much power. Even though it's the same power, regardless of low or high frequency that you're using, it's all so focal that even though it would seem to make sense, I'm putting all my power into one central point. That is not the case in sonar. So you don't get with a higher frequency, you get much better bottom composition, bottom detail to what you're looking at, and better target separation between fish that are below it. But you don't get as much power in the sense that it does not read as deep. Lower frequency, while you don't get as high crisp detail on the bottom, you get a much broader search out of it. So that's a very high level, the difference between frequencies. And then last but not least, you have chirp frequency, where that will ping every single frequency from your low to your high, back and forth over and over and over again. And so if you have an 83 200 that's chirp, it will ping at 83, 84, 85, etc., all the way up to 200, back down to 199, 198, etc., all the way down to 83, and back and forth. And essentially what you get is this kind of pulsating reading of your sonar that gives you the best of both worlds, where you're getting that high frequency that's giving you really, really good bottom composition and better fish target separation, but then also sweeping out to that lower frequency, which covers more water. You have a bigger cone. It's going to be able to see more of the bottom. You're able to pick up more fish potentially. There you go. That is everything we're going to cover, and at least the very basics of frequencies, because that matters greatly with the different types of sonars that we're going to talk about. There's much more that could be explained, but really this is about going over like interpretation of the imagery that you are seeing. That is the goal with this. I get a lot more technical, a lot more things on this, but that's a different topic for a different day. So without further ado, I'm going to make myself super tiny, and I'm going to make this super big. Let's see how that works. Is there another setting that would be better? Oh yeah, there we go. Now I'm all the way down the corner. Okay. So starting out with your traditional sonar, I typically will use, when I'm out on my boat, I usually don't use my traditional sonar on my trolling motor, and you can have that one of two different ways. It is either built into the nose cone on your trolling motor itself, or you have a separate transducer that you have mounted to the nose cone of your trolling motor, or you have something transit mounted off the back of your boat where you can actually physically see it hanging. Bass boats, I don't really know of anybody that has a proper through hull where you have actually drilled a hole through your boat, and there's a flanged face to your transducer that would come up almost flush on the underside of your boat. Almost no, I don't think I know I don't know anybody that uses a proper through hull transducer, but then there's a shoot through hull where the transducer is inside the bottom of the boat and it's epoxied to the bottom, and it's just reading through the hull, whatever it is. In most cases, fiberglass or it's aluminum, especially the bass boat industry. I will say one thing I did forget to bring up. The overall most important aspect about how sonar works is that it cannot read through air. And that's extremely important, because what you are seeing with different sonar types, you're not technically reading fish, you're reading the air bladder within the fish. And that matters, because that's what, depending upon fish species that you're going after, the overall quality of your turn can matter greatly. Now, it obviously can't read through very solid things, but in the traditional sonar standpoint, it's air that it can't read through. You're not able to read through the air bladder on the fish, and that is what you are actually seeing on your sonar. Okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to stay on point. So this is a really good example. As good as it gets for your traditional 2D sonar. And what you are seeing is bottom at about 17-ish feet, where you've got that really nice hard return straight across the bottom. And then I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. Probably not. How am I going to do this? Nope. So right in the middle of the screen, about 10 feet down, you have that one really broad line. And it's stretching for about, we'll say, a third of the length of the overall screen from left to right. That is a fish. As to what kind of fish, who knows? That is the biggest question that everybody has when they're using sonar for the first time. Beyond understanding what am I looking at, then it's, well, how do I know what it is that I'm looking at, in the sense of what fish is that? There is no definitive way for you to know that unless you know everything about the pond, from all of the different fish species that are in there, and then your typical average size. Let's say this was your standard pond, your standard kettle pond. Literally anything that is just a typical bass fishery, right? You are going to have, as far as something that could give you a really solid singular return like this, both largemouth and smallmouth bass, probably pickerel and or pike. You've got catfish, and you may have drum or carp. Like, those are bigger fish with bigger air bladders that give you a much bigger return. there's no way to know what that is other than if you know seasonal behavior of all those different fish species, and then relative to where you are in the body of water. Uh, I I could go on for another 20 minutes just on that to give specific examples, but that's the only way you can know exactly what kind of fish you're looking at, or more appropriately, what is the highest probability of what kind of fish you are seeing on your sonar. So that's just one example of your traditional sonar. So you've got that one really solid line, and then you've got all this like old school TV screen fuzziness above it. And a lot of people ask, well, what is that? In this case, I am 99% confident that that is just noise, in the sense that there is either physical particulate or there is some sort of aeration, meaning air bubbles, that are present inside the water column. Now, if you were idling while you were getting this, there's a good chance that that's aeration, a lot of bubbles from your motor. Or if you're in an area with a lot of current where there is aeration of some kind that is creating air bubbles all throughout the water column, like that's also what that could be. Now, it could also just be that the sensitivity or your gain is jacked up wicked high on this. And all your sensitivity and or gain does is it kind of disperses. That's not accurate. It kind of ignores a lot of the little particulate and some potential air bubbles that could be being read by your sonar. If you have your sensitivity jacked way up, it's going to pick up those little returns that it's getting and basically like magnify them. Versus if you turn it down, it's going to continue to decrease the size in those and then just get rid of all that. Oliver, that's a really good point. And actually, no, Dogbone, I was not anchored when I took this photo. This was, I don't remember what I was doing when I got this, but this is just another example. So in this case, I think a lot of what you're seeing is just particulate and or some aeration in the water. And the sensitivity in this case is jacked way up. And I take it back. I'm sorry. This is not my screenshot. I forgot where this one came from, but it's not mine. I almost never have noise like this because I keep my sensitivity down a little bit to mitigate a lot of this level of noise. So that's one example. This one's a lot clearer. This one I pulled from the internet. It's not mine. So fair warning. I don't know who to give credit to, but this is a different one. So this is much easier to interpret what you're looking at, as far as there's a lot of fish on screen and there's very minimal noise. If you look at the whole bottom that you're getting for a return there, and I would say in the center within, the bottom's at like what, 26 feet. And if you're looking at the bottom center where you've got some of that fuzziness, that might be a little bit of noise. It could be particulate of some kind that's being stirred up from the bottom. But I do think a lot of that is also bait fish down there. Versus if you look at across the top at about the 5-foot line, there is a very consistent line going all the way across left to right. I would say that's noise more than anything else. Other than that, everything else that you're seeing, where let's say on the left side, you have 15.6, which should be the depth. And just going down and right from that, you have a solid return of some really dark reddish orange and even a little bit of yellow in the middle, all those lines. Like, those are phenomenal returns on your sonar, where in all likelihood, everything we're looking on here, all of these solid lines where you kind of got a lot of like boomerangs and almost U shapes, these are all fish. And the longer the fish stays underneath the boat, as close to center on your transducer as possible, the stronger the return you're going to get, which is then represented by a much broader line with a deeper color, a darker or richer color. So those lines by the 15.6, where you got like a lot of that red and orange, a little bit of the yellow in there, that's a phenomenal return with those fish, that little school, that this person must have gone right over the top of them. So they were perfect inside of that cone, and they got a phenomenal return that was then showing on their sonar. Some of these other lines that are a little bit fainter, those are still fish. It's a good chance that it's still the exact same fish that you got in that great cluster of a return there by the 15.6 on the left, but they weren't perfectly inside the cone. They may have just been on the very fringes of what the cone angle of your transducer could actually see in this traditional 2D sonar. I could, again, go on and on and on about this as far as continuing to explain a bunch of nuances to different situations, but I really wanted to give you the gist of what you're looking at here. Almost everything that you're looking at on this screen that is above the bottom, which is about 25 and a half, 26 feet, those are all fish. And it's a mix between bigger fish, which is probably your target species, and bait fish, is what they're feeding on. And in all likelihood, it also could just be bait fish. You know, that could be a giant school of crappie that you went over, and they could be big crappie. That doesn't necessarily mean that this is your target species, which for us is bass, whether it's largemouth or smallmouth. But if I were in a bass lake, it's going to be one of those two things. I either went over a school of crappie or I went over a school of probably smallmouth. I'm going to guess this could also be a school of spotted bass if you were down south. From everything I know about spotted bass, even though I've never fished for them, that's typically how they would school up. But just Drew, this is clear. Never had or used electronics. I can't believe that's fish. Yes, that is 100% fish. This would be a lot easier if I could do, as Oliver said, like a demo mode, but I would not be able to figure out how to do that for the live stream to hook up one of those and plug it in, unless I had a Garmin unit and I could HDMI out, but I don't own Garmin. I'm a Lowrance guy, with the exception of my one thing that I have for Humminbird, my Helix. Okay, so that's 2D sonar in a nutshell as far as fish finding. Now, if we come down and look at the bottom, the actual bottom of the lake, you've got a bunch of different returns, but they are solid. This is where you can start to decipher the difference between hard bottom, in the sense of just really hard pack, clean bottom, like clean sand you would find in your typical like reservoirs. You'd find not reservoirs, glacier lakes in the Lakes region of New Hampshire, where, you know, it's just all clean, hard packed bottom sand, and then kind of muckier bottom. So when it comes to 2D sonar and reading bottom composition, the more dense your bottom contact is, whether it be a rock or really clean sand, the stronger your return is going to be in the form of a much brighter, bolder color. So as the color kind of gets darker, you're getting a much less return. And it doesn't really matter what color scheme you're working with, because there's like, I mean, Humminbird, I think, has 20 different color palettes you can choose from. And there's pros and cons to each one of those. But regardless of what you do, there is a chance that it doesn't matter what color you go with. You're going to get that same kind of really bright is a hard bottom return versus kind of a darker color is a softer bottom. So bright return, hard bottom, rock or sand. And as it gets darker in color, you're getting into a softer bottom. And that could be, I mean, if it's really consistent, like the bottom of this, that might just be a little bit of softer silt, or just kind of a muddy, mucky kind of bottom. But because you get such a crisp, clear return across that, I do think it's uniform. You're not seeing vegetation here. That would present itself in a different way, which I'm hoping I have on the next screenshot. Yes, I do. So now we're going to cross from 2D sonar over into down imaging. We're going to bring the two together a little bit. This is not the greatest example, but it's the best that I could find in short order, just showing these two, 2D sonar and down imaging. You have a lot going on the left, your traditional 2D sonar. And you've got all of this crazy, really, really like just bold red that's returning on everything. So it's kind of hard to see, like, what am I looking at? Other than you can see just a little bit of separation. And in that little bit of separation, you've got some lighter green color that's further separating the thick, bold red from the rest of the bottom that's like just almost pure red. So this tells me two things. One, there are fish present. What they are, not sure, but I am seeing a very defined separation, even if it's maybe to some other eyes subtle. For me, I think this is extremely defined. It's not obvious, but it is very defined, where you can see their separation, and that color green, that lighter color, is helping to further show you that. So, but in the middle of all that, it's what I always call fuzzy or hairy when you're looking at the sonar, where you have not that really hard cut defined line that you were reading on the bottom on that previous image. But again, it's a little bit more fuzzy. It's jagged. It's softer all around. That, to me, always indicates aquatic vegetation on the bottom. And that's where I know that that's what I'm trying to look for when I am looking for aquatic vegetation. You're not going to get this nice, sharp, consistent, clean return down the bottom that was almost drawn with a ruler. You're going to get that fuzzy, not so consistent, all up and down, crazy squiggles. And that's how I know you're in bottom vegetation. That should wrap up 2D sonar. But please, if you have questions, throw them to me at the end, because I'm already 20 minutes in and I'm barely getting it onto the second of 5 different sonars. This is where down imaging really becomes important for when you're in an area that, in my opinion, has a lot of things like either downed trees or just submerged logs with branches still off of it, standing timber if you're in flooded reservoirs, things like that have like a ton of different things that are all coming out off of one particularly hard structure, but that fish are also in there. So on your traditional 2D sonar, you tend to have, I think some of them go up to 250 kilohertz, but I think most are about 200 kilohertz. When you get into down imaging, now you're getting into a much higher frequency band, and this is what's going to give you that better target separation. And this picture really does a great job of visualizing what does that mean by target separation. Not only is it higher resolution to give you better detail on what it is that you're looking at, but again, that target separation comes into play here. Both of these sonars are being read by the same transducer at the exact same time. So you're looking at the exact same spot on this body of water, just in 2 different modes, 2D sonar and your down imaging. And now you can see the importance of where down imaging come into play in situations like this, where if you only had 2D sonar, I would look at that and be like, okay, I've got probably some grassy bottom, probably a lot of grass bottom, and I can see there's some sort of fish presence that's hanging out right at the top. Then you come over to your down imaging, and you can see not only is it a little bit of grassy bottom, but it looks like it's aquatic vegetation or submerged vegetation on top of harder structure. I'm seeing some really hard, bright yellow, almost white returns right about in the middle on the down imaging, which is the right side, all the black on top and that golden, orange, yellow all at the bottom. Right in the middle where it dips down before it comes back up. Like I said, there's that really, really bright return. And to me, I think what we're seeing is it's either rocks or it's just really hard packed bottom that's slightly exposed in between some of that submerged vegetation. But then more than anything, that's just not a couple of fish. That's a lot of fish. That's your target separation. That's the benefit of what you get when you get into a higher frequency when you're talking about different sonars. So that's the importance of what you can get from one over the other. It just paints a clearer picture of what it is that you're potentially looking at. Down imaging, I mean, there's probably 1,000 other examples I can go through to continue to explain that. But that is the gist of it. This is just yet another example, and honestly, an even better example. Again, 2D sonar on the left, your down imaging on the right. If you only had your 2D sonar, and I went over that really quick, I would immediately think giant school of fish. But that's not the case. If I didn't have the down imaging beside it, then in the case of if I went by in one really quick pass, I'd be like, oh, damn, we just went over a school of fish. But if I turned around and drove back over it and I saw the same exact return on the 2D sonar, then you would know that, no, that's not a school of fish. That is hard structure, and there might be fish in it, but I can't tell. And we come over to the down imaging side, and in one pass, you know right off the gate, oh, damn, that's not fish. That's just a sunken tree or shrub. But given the fact that the top of this is at about 10 feet high and the bottom of it is at, what is that, 13? So about half of that is 7-ish. Man, 10 to about 30 feet. See, that's about 20 feet tall. That's a tree. So there'd be one hell of a shrub. That's a tree. And you wouldn't know that in one pass with 2D sonar. That's like the biggest thing when people are like, oh, I really need one or the other. No, it's important to have, it's more beneficial to have both. I don't want to say it's important. I don't want to say any one is you must have versus, you don't need to worry about it. There's pros and cons to all of these. There's trade-offs throughout as well. And this, I'm just trying to do the best I can to visually show and explain why one matters over the other or in conjunction with the other is the best way to put it. So down imaging, really, I showed more talking about the structure and then the target separation to show the fish. But what else can fish look like on down imaging? The question is, do I have another screenshot? Maybe not that one. This one's still good. And it's gonna be a little bit harder. If I could zoom in on this, I would. If you were to look at the tree, the really, really big tree that's about 20 feet tall, and look underneath on the left side. If you go the middle of the tree all the way to the left, to like the leftmost point of the branches on that tree, and go straight down, you will see that there's two white dots. One a little bit left outside the tree. I mean, just barely. If you draw a straight line down, it's like right here. And then from that straight line down, just a little bit right, definitely underneath the branches, there's another white smaller dot. That is very likely fish right there as well. And it's interesting how different sonar represents fish differently in there. In your traditional 2D sonar, you got these big broad lines if you've gone right over the top of them. Because I'm not sure how else to explain that without confusing the issue. But you already saw it. That's the best I can do at this moment. When you go into your down imaging, your higher frequency, and it's pinging so much faster, you're going to get like these solid white blobs. And you will see the same thing on 360 imaging and on your side imaging as well, where now you're at like that 455 kilohertz or even higher, because it's just the way that it draws it. There's a more technical way of explaining it, but when you see those white dots, in the case, especially of sonar, like, oh, damn, boomerang, 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 or solid line, that means that fish was hanging right underneath my sonar for more than just a quick pass. He was either swimming with it, or you had stayed in the same point as he swam through really, really slow, whatever the case. On your down imaging, side imaging 360, it's still only going to give you this solid white return. And it doesn't look like a fish, but it's just this bigger white blob. There's also what I would think is another fish hanging right in the middle of the water column, not quite on just the down imaging side as well, just a little bit left of center. That's probably another fish right there as well. Those whites are, to me, I would say fish. And actually, now I look at the 2D sonar, you can barely see it on the very left side of this entire image. You can just see this little bit of a couple of pixels sticking out right in the middle of the screen. That's right about the same point as that white dot that's suspended on the down imaging side. So yeah, 100% I would say that's a fish. So that's how fish can present themselves under different sonar types. Well, one last one as far as 2D sonar and down imaging. And I liked this one. I found this on the internet, don't remember where, because I feel like this is a good example of, in my opinion, too much noise in your 2D sonar. Now, if you're looking at it, left side 2D sonar, it would look like there is a metric ton of fish. But in and around every single one of those giant yellow blobs, that a little bit of a boomerang to them, there is a metric ton of noise. So I cannot decide on really what it is that I'm seeing here without having been there myself. Are there truly fish down there and there's just so much noise from either really high turbid conditions, which means, the presence of actual like physical particulate in the water, or a lot of aeration? Maybe it's an area with really strong currents that's coming over a current break and it's just blowing all this, these air bubbles through the water. Or, is it just that they've got their sensitivity maxed out and they're just getting a bunch of false returns? I don't know. I'm more prone to believe that this is probably the presence of fish that you can only see through all the aeration and particulate in the water because the sensitivity is jacked up so high. But having the down imaging beside it be almost clear, with the exception of what looks like noise to me, this one is not that cut and dry. I would say this is on the extreme side of things. I will also say, if your 2D sonar looks like that on the left all the time, turn your sensitivity or your gain down, because you've got jacked up way too much. You've got too much noise in there. You're going to be missing some of the more important details, in my opinion, and I would back it down. Case in point for me, when I am running my 2D sonar on my Lowrance HDS live. Yeah, live. No, I have a pro on this one as well. I leave the sensitivity at +2. And it's different from brand to brand on how this all works. I mean, on the Rants for your traditional sonar, it starts at 0 and you can either go, plus or minus on your sensitivity. But then sensitivity or gain on your forward facing sonar, in this case for Lowrance, it's active target 1 and 2. You're changing the sensitivity, but it's like 0 to 100%. And on my forward facing, I leave it about 89%. I get a little bit more noise, but I also have an easier time of seeing bait fish. And I just have a practice eye. I can discern between the two. But on my traditional 2D sonar, I keep it at about a +2, and I think I can go up to like a +15 or something absurd like that. I don't want a lot of noise like that, because for me, 2D sonar, I'm usually going to get a good enough return on pretty much everything I'm looking for, whether it be bass or bait fish. But for me, more importantly, when I'm scanning with my 2D, I'm really looking more for overall structure and better detail inside of that to supplement what I'm seeing on my side imaging. Food for thought. Okay, that, I believe, what screenshot am I on? There are too many things open. That one. Okay. Now we're going to go from our traditional 2D sonar, 2D sonar, down imaging, like everything is pointing straight down. Now we're going to go into sideways mode. Sorry, I punched the mic. That's the goal. But please, again, if you have any questions, get ready to fire them out at the end of this. These next ones, I feel like, are much more straightforward. And we should be able to go through this a little bit faster, especially the side imaging and the 360. I feel like this is much easier to understand because it's such a much higher resolution than any of these other demonstrations, these other sonar types. So what I do have here is not the greatest example, but trying to bridge that gap between what you're seeing on your 2D sonar and your side imaging. And other examples are going to be better, but this to me is about the best example I could find that shows fish on both your 2D and your side imaging. So again, 2D sonar, straight down, side imaging, straight out, left and right. And they're both doing the same thing. It's just ping, return, ping, return, ping, return. Every time it pings and returns, it is drawing what it is seeing, both marking anything for air in the middle versus hard bottom and drawing your image from that. In this image, everything you're seeing on your 2D sonar, which is the top half of the screen, that is all fish. If you look, oh boy, starting at, again, just the top half of the screen, you can see a little bit of bottom and it dips down below the split screen between your 2D and your side imaging. Then bottom comes up a little bit, dips down out of view, and then it comes up. And now we can see bottom almost till a little bit beyond halfway point on this. That is a phenomenal hard bottom return on that. And then everything above that, every single one of those lines that, as MP Fishing said, is that spaghetti, that's all fish. Again, what species? No idea, because I don't know where the screenshot was taken. But, man, it could be a number of different things. They're reading to about 40 feet down. I can't see water temperature, 83 feet. 83 feet, 83 degrees. Given this time, that water temperature, that kind of congregation of fish, if this were freshwater, I would say that is a mega school of smallmouth, or of any bass, really. It could be any one of the three. I don't usually see schools of largemouth that big, that deep. I usually tend to see those solo roaming. Smallmouth, on the other hand, I've seen them roam crazy schools like that. But what backs this up to know that that's fish, when you're looking at for your sonar, your 2D sonar, you look at the side imaging, and on at the very bottom of this image, left and right at about the 40 mark. So it's 40 feet left and 40 feet right. If we look at the left side, you can see right in between 60 and 40, there's a bunch of these kind of longer, broad white lines. And then you can see them between 20 and 40 on the right side of, the whole bottom section of the screen. And that's fish. That is what you always see when you are looking at side imaging, when you want to see fish. They're always going to be represented as white lines or white dots. Getting confused. Sorry, not getting. I'm getting distracted by reading comments. But yeah, that's reading fish on your side imaging, backed up by also seeing them on your 2D sonar. But the fact that you can see these fish suspended directly below the boat, so they're in 40 feet down, as evidenced by your 2D sonar, and then you look at your side imaging, and you're not picking up bottom until 40 feet left and 40 feet right. So just further proof that everybody's reading the same depth at the same time. And then you can see on your 2D sonar, you have fish at the bottom and you have them way up off the bottom. You come down to your side imaging, you have fish. If you look at the 40, either left or right, you have fish up off the bottom coming in towards the center. You can see all those broad white lines that are separated away from the bottom at the 40-foot mark. And then you have other fish to the left and right of the 40-foot marks that are, kind of blended into the bottom. Those fish could be suspended too, but it looks like some of those are still reading in the bottom as backed up by your 2D sonar. So that's fish finding kind of in a nutshell for what I'm looking for in side imaging. It's not always the easiest, but it does. That's the best general rule of thumb to keep this as simple as possible. That will help you. Now let's get into the structure, because really, I think most people that are out there using side imaging, especially the first time you get into it, they want to understand the structure aspect of it, not just fish. Now, these are screenshots that I took from last Saturday. So I can promise you there are no fish to be seen on this because we got skunked. It was bad. There was nothing worthy of taking a picture of, so I didn't get a chance to post about it. But this and the next couple are going to be a good example of side imaging that will show nice, clean, hard bottom, rocks and or vegetation. That was the goal of what I tried to get out of this. And then this is also backed up. I got a few with your 2D, your down imaging, and your side imaging, and then I've got just side imaging. And I'm also going to talk about range on your side imaging that really helps paint a better picture as well, for what it is that you're looking at. So in this case, I've got my side imaging out 100 feet either side. So I'm 100 feet left and 100 feet right. So I'm looking at 200 feet of water at a single time with my side imaging set up like this. This particular area has a lot of submerged vegetation and rocks. And what we were looking at for the most part here is submerged vegetation. And I know that, one, because I've gone through this place a million times in the 30 years I've been fishing there. I know what's there. Two, my 2D sonar and my down imaging giving me that vertical presentation help me to better decipher. It should help you to better decipher what it is I'm looking at my side imaging. So remember, 2D and down imaging, looking straight down. Side is reading sideways. So when you're looking top down, unless there's something suspended, like say a tree, you're not going to get shadows from what you're looking at. You're just not going to see what's beyond that. It's going to be one big blob. Looking sideways, anything that comes up off of the bottom will have shadows behind it, dark black areas, because your sonar literally cannot see that. It cannot ping what is behind this vertical structure, whether it be a branch or a rock or vegetation. It doesn't matter. If it's dense enough, your sonar cannot ping through it. It's going to stop on the hard structure all the way up until it then is pinging past the top of it and hitting bottom behind it. That helps you better understand the overall structure is not the right word. How do I want to put this? This is challenging me. My head still hurts. I don't know how to explain this. Other than the fact that how much shadow you have, like I would say the percentage of it, and the length or the distance of that shadowing can really help you to understand what kind of bottom thing you're looking at. Structure. I keep coming back to structure because that's really what it is. Whether it's hard, again, rock or tree branch, log, whatever the case, or soft vegetation. It is structure one way or another. Your 2D kind of helps better show you for your first time of seeing it what your side imaging is trying to tell you as well. So your 2D sonar, your down imaging, you can see you've got a lot of vertical kind of jagged returns, right? Because of that, because there's nothing smooth and really defined crisp lines, this is vegetation. When you come down to your side imaging, you can see directly beneath the boat, you've got this bright yellow return, right? Like that is your strongest point of return. We're in relatively shallow water. I was recording that at the very beginning of the side imaging. And as I got that would be all the way down at the bottom of the side imaging window. And as I got into deeper water, which is at the top, because it refreshes from the top down, it's constantly sliding from the top down as it's refreshing your imagery. You can see I got a little bit deeper. I'm getting further distance between bottom of my transducer, so it's not giving me as quite a high of a ping. But now we go left and right, and you can see that the color gradient gets darker and darker and darker because I'm getting into softer and softer bottom composition. Composition was the word I was looking for earlier. Thank you, myself. I finally got there. As you get further out, your color gets a lot darker and worse. Your return is not as strong versus, say, when you're looking at the top portion on the right of your side image of this side imaging window, and it stays mostly uniform all the way out to 100 feet, but you get the whole left side and it gets really, really dark out towards the end. And then you got all these areas of black mixed in. Black is shadows. Shadows mean that there is raised vertical structure of some kind. Your bottom composition is not uniform. There's something there that is creating shadow. Difference between, again, vegetation and harder structure, be it rock or logs, timber of any kind, whatever the case, is the lack of definition in that bottom composition. This is just a scattered mess with relatively long shadowing and shading behind everything, going from the center line of the boat away. So you're seeing everything, all the shadows on the far side. Again, it's that sonar. It cannot get there. It has to read over the top before it can hit the ground beyond, or the vegetation beyond what it is standing up and blocking it. And it's hairy. There's no other way I can explain this that I feel is the easiest way to interpret what you're looking at. Vegetation on your side imaging, your down imaging, your 2D sonar, it just looks hairy, like a, you know, like an old troll or a gnome, like those toys kids used to have back when I was a kid in the 90s. You know, things like that. It's just, there's nothing really defined about it. That I will just continue to come up with different analogies for what I'm trying to explain, but that is the gist of it when you're looking at your side imaging and trying to find aquatic vegetation. So now we come back to this point. Man, my nose is really itchy. Uno momento. Now we come to this. We're looking at just purely side imaging now. I like this because it's both. We're looking at two completely different types of bottom composition. On the left, you have aquatic vegetation, submerged vegetation, because it's kind of got that hairy-ish look to it. You have a lot of shadows being cast behind it, but none of it's really long. But it's dense in what you're looking at. It's dense without definition. It's lumpy. That is another way that I could put how you would view submerged vegetation on your side imaging, especially in this case where you have several feet of water above the top of the vegetation. That there's a lot of sonar penetration, you know, across the top and beyond it. You've got a lot of that, what you're seeing on the left. It's that kind of lumpy, rough, not well defined return that you're getting. And again, that color shading where you've got really, really bright colors at the top and then blacks on the backside and then much darker muted colors the further out in the way you get, you're getting less of a return. It's not that strong. Everything's coming back not so great. That's vegetation. Now you come to the right side. Now you're looking at rocks. This is a mix of vegetation and rocks on the right, but it is primarily rocks. What really helps you to understand that is if you look on the leading edge. So if you go from that center line, you're looking right. As you travel right with your eyes and you're looking, everything that you hit first, that's your leading edge, okay? So left side of any structure you can see when we're going right. On the leading edge, the leading faces of all those rocks that have those big, long, very clearly defined shadows, you also have a very clearly defined, very bright return on the face of those rocks because it is an incredibly hard, dense, smooth, physical piece of thing that's in the water that the sonar is getting a great ping and return off of, which is why you're getting such a strong return off this, why your color is so bright. It is seeing high density, hard structure, and it is telling you that by the color gradient that it's returning back to you. And then the shadowing, the pure black that's behind it. Look at how crisp and clean those lines are as it goes by top and bottom, or in this case, if you're looking at it sideways, the left and right and across the top of that rock. Those shadows are like perfect. You have that combination of that really, really bright return, extremely crisp lines on that leading edge, and then extremely crisp lines on the shadowing, the shading going on behind it. Voila. To me, that's all rocks. And then if you were to, oh boy, where it says this unit up in the very top center, and you go just a little bit to the right and maybe down just a smidge, you've got sporadic chunk rock down there. There's very little shading behind it, but you can see very clearly defined returns and profiling on that rock as well. That to me tells me there's a bunch of riprap, fist-sized rock. We've talked about that hundreds of times between all the videos I've uploaded and the live streams we've done. You've got that mix of everything kind of going in this one area. There's a reason why I was out here doing this for this live stream, is because this is typically an area that I like to focus on in this cold water, where I'm fishing these steep, chunky, rocky drop-offs with vegetation present in the immediate area, and quick transitions from that deeper water relative to the body of water that you're on up to those shallower areas with structure. And as we have the ebbs and flows of those overnight to daily temperatures and, you know, various sun penetration, you get a lot of wild movement from the shallows, the high points, back down to the deep water. And we've talked about that hundreds of times. I am, for the first time, really visualizing this in sonar form for you guys to understand what it is that I'm looking for. This particular spot has everything. It's got deep water right against it. It's got chunky rock. It's got vegetation. Like literally everything you could possibly want to look for this time of the year is here. It just so happens this place sucks and it's kicked my butt more times than not. So I would not recommend that. That's just a yet another example of side imaging. Now, one thing I want to talk about with side imaging, and this is really important, is your distance or your range and how that can change the overall detail of what it is that you're looking at. The further out that you send your distance, the less detail you actually get. The shorter range that you have, the better your detail. I'm going to show you exactly what that means. Now, this is relative to the depth of water that you're in. I'm showing you a shallow water application. Everything I've been showing you so far in my side imaging, this is all like 20 feet of water or less. So this is, in my opinion, definitely shallow water. Right now, we're looking 60 feet aside, 120 feet of lake at the same time, but 60 feet left, 60 feet right. And you can see all the aquatic vegetation on the right, all the rocks, aquatic vegetation on the left, rocks on the right. Now we go out to 100. This is the exact same spot, just a few feet beyond where I just was. You still have all that vegetation on the left. You have some vegetation on the right, but down the bottom, there are rocks there. And it's not that easy to tell at the 100-foot range, because you are basically taking this magnifying glass and you're moving out and away from it. And you're losing a lot of that detail the further out you go with your side imaging. If I were in 50 feet of water, then I wouldn't be able to use that 60-foot range, because the first 50 feet, I'm not going to be reading anything. So you have to go deeper. But if you're dealing with much shallower water, in this case, I mean, you can go as wide as you want, but I would say go as narrow as you're willing to and daring to, because you're going to get a much better understanding of what it is that you're looking at than if you would if you said, say you're in 20 feet of water and you had it blowing out 150 feet per side. You're going to see a lot, but you may not understand what it is that you're seeing. I hope that makes sense. There's too much, and the resolution of the size and quality and length of the shadows that you're trying to find behind everything gets lost the further out that you expand your range. So try and bring it back in a little bit. You'll get much better details with your side imaging. Again, if I could just go on and on. So that was all, a lot of vegetation and some rock. This is just, yet again, 100 feet. I am down in about 50. I can't see it. It says the live thing is right behind there. 9 feet. Okay. Yay, multiple screens. I should not be at 100 feet aside. Really, if I'm in 9 feet of water, I should be at like 60 to 80 feet. But I knew that there was going to be other rocks even further out, so I blew this out to 100 feet for this. What I'm going over, right about in the very center of this, and especially the right side, that is an individual rock pile with a lot of clean sand all around it. There's almost no vegetation on this rock pile. That is further evidenced by all of this insanely bright yellow return that you're getting right off the center line of the boat, a little bit left, primarily on the right. And then you have kind of that chunky with a lot of little shading texture that's all over that bottom composition off that very clearly defined rock pile. But it's not a boulder field. It's not a big boulder pile. That is just a rock pile. Like that's all rocks like this big, this whole pile. And it honestly may have been placed there at some point if they were working on the pond. If somebody told me they had done that, I would firmly believe it because it is so uniform overall in like the height and the way the whole pile is dispersed. And it's all primarily compromised of the same size and shape rocks. It seriously looks like dump truck just came in and dumped this thing right there. But then you go a little bit further up on this image and out to the right, you can see there's a lot more scattered, very sporadic vegetation, and then more rocks up on the top right. And that's just another interpretation of what it is that I would see with side imaging. That's a lot for everything on that. Tell you what, if you have questions, start firing them off right now while I delete all of these images, or most of them, so I can pull up a couple of 360 images, because this is the point in the stream where I said this was going to take me a few minutes to be able to pull this all up. Yep, come on, StreamYard. I know you can find this folder. And yep, that folder and that one. And we're going to open that one, but we're going to remove it really quick. All right, tell me this is going to be faster. Then I, oh, yeah. There we go. Take that, remove that really quick. One more. I have 3 of these for 360. Nope, I take that back. I have 4. And last one. Nope, I've reached the limit. Let me get rid of this one. Today I learned that there is a limit to the number of files you can preload inside of StreamYard. Okay. Ooh, Dogbone, I saved that last question for later. That's going to be a good one. Okay, 360 imaging. So none of these are mine. I pulled them from a variety of sources online. I'm sorry that I cannot properly credit everyone. There's a couple that came directly from the Humminbird website. I think this is one of them. 360 imaging is basically side imaging from a top-down perspective that is constantly spinning. Best way I can explain it. And it works phenomenally well for a very broad, highly detailed, top-down view of what it is that you're looking at, all within 360 degrees of the center point of your transducer, out to, I think what we're looking at is the maximum range. It might go a little bit more than that. It says 300 feet. I think it goes beyond that, but for all intents and purposes, let's just say this is the maximum that it can go. So imagine you're out in 50 feet of water, and you know there's rock piles all around you because you've lost 100 jigs over the last 20 years, but you never really knew what it looked like. And you got Mega 360 or 360 imaging of any kind for the first time, and you want to know what it looked like. This is a perfect example of what it is that you're looking at. And again, it's a perfect top-down view out to the maximum range you can set it at, and it's just sitting there constantly spinning and repainting the image over and over and over again, but with insanely high detail, because I believe the Mega 360 is 1.2 megahertz, or which would be 1200 kilohertz. Very, very high frequency. So again, higher the frequency, the better detail that you get. But overall depth capability for what it can do starts to get reduced. For everything that we do as bass fishermen, we don't really go that deep that we ever truly test the limits of what a lot of sonar can do for overall depth capabilities. So when I say at a certain point you can run out of power for what we do, you almost never button up against that. What are you seeing here? Let's start with that at least. This is a mix. I feel like this should be a lot easier to understand what it is you're seeing at 360, because to me, this is the equivalent of putting on a pair of goggles and looking down through the water as if it was completely transparent, or just even standing in your boat and looking down with 100% clarity and transparency down through the water to see everything below your feet within 300 feet of where you're standing. So seeing things like timber, if you were to bisect this whole thing, both left to right, top to bottom, you quarter the image, you would look at the bottom left quadrant, you've got a tree limb or a standing tree that was cut relatively high, standing up damn near vertical in that bottom left quadrant. And again, up top, right, top middle, just a little bit left and a little bit right, you have more timber there. You've got these really long straight lines with an incredibly bright color return. And then beyond that, you have a bunch of rocks. Drew just said it perfectly. I see rock and wood. That's exactly what you're seeing. Given that we did the basics, right? Like you're down at your 2D sonar, you're down imaging, your side imaging, and understanding how that all works and how to interpret it, coming to 360 really is, to me, about as easy as it gets. And this is very easy to interpret. You get so much better detail too about what you're seeing. And really, it's still the same principle, just with a slightly different perspective as far as what the sonar can and cannot see, because the angle that it is trying to ping to and what it cannot see behind, right? So you have these rocks and you've got really broadly, perfectly defined shading behind it. And you almost see the profile of the rock in some of the shading. Like if you look just a little bit below the center line, but dead center left to right, you've got that one giant boulder that's almost directly below the boat. Look at the shadow that's casting. You're seeing the profile of that rock from the shadow, which is awesome. But, again, it's just like any other sonar. It's drawing a shadow because the sonar cannot ping to directly behind the rock. So you're not going to be able to see the whole thing. You get over the top of it, there's almost no shadow. You can see the whole rock for exactly what it is, and it's amazing. But because you're on top of it, it's a little bit harder to get an understanding of just how tall it is as well. You kind of can. You kind of have to do a little bit of mental math to figure it out on the fly, but it's there. Now, if you were to do top left corner, you've got more kind of sporadic chunky rock that trails away from you at about like an 11 o'clock angle. From the top right corner, biased a little bit more towards the center line, top to bottom, you've got fairly big rock and a little bit chunky, but then you've got like that softer return with some light shading behind it. To me, that almost looks like you got a big rock that's closer, and then there's a little bit of a hump that's definitely below the rock that's trailing away from you. Not so much the sonar can't completely ping it, but it is pretty damn close to being able to ping everything behind that hump. If it was truly like a hump that dropped off, you'd have a very broad, dark shadow shading behind it. Whereas this isn't quite black behind it, like you have behind those rocks. It comes up and then slowly tapers. So you're still getting some pinging return. It's just extremely weak because it's coming down and just barely kissing the transducer on the return. And then really, if you look center line all the way to the far right of this circle, then a little bit above and below the middle line, where it starts to get really dark, that's because that's the land that, the bottom of the lake tapering away from you. Versus if you look just dead center left of dead center top to bottom, but left of center, you can see that really, really bright return as it comes up, and then it gets darker as it rolls away. So this is cool because it looks like he's in the edge, like in the middle of a creek bed, like the mouth of it. If you were looking from the bottom up, you get a nice, hard defined line that goes up and then it cuts around. And on the left side, it comes up and then cuts around a little bit. But you've got the standing timber right on the very edge of those defined lines. We get a very sharp contrast from one depth to the next. You get those bright returns right at the very edges of all that. That's not just rocks, it's also elevation change or depth change. And then as it rolls away, going like up to the top from like 12 o'clock back to about 10 o'clock. Yeah, it's rolling away. That looks like a creek bed. The more I look at that, that's how I would interpret that. So that's another way to really be able to utilize 360. Now, one of the things that we've talked about a lot, I will reiterate it again. For me, what 360 is worth its weight in gold for two things. One, I know exactly what I'm looking at. If you go back to side imaging and like there is that, do I still have that up or did I make that go away? Let's grab this really quick. Right? If I'm looking to the right, just on the side imaging aspect, the top right of the side imaging window, there's a little bit of a rock pile out there. And I can see where it's a much darker color before it gets to a slightly brighter return where the hard pack bottom starts to develop. And I can see there's some kind of chunky rock there, but that's the best I can get for details out of that. If I was looking at it now with the 360, I would be able to tell exactly how big those rocks are, if there was any gaps, like significant gaps in between them, if there was vegetation in between them. Like those are the details that I can see on 360 that I can't see inside imaging. So that's one of two things, right? Then the other thing I would say just as important as your ability to cast with insane accuracy. So I can look at my 360, and as long as I know that I've got that thing centered with the keel of my boat, I will literally, you must have seen us doing the videos. I'll look at it like, damn, there's a rock pile out that way. And I'll put my rod on the screen, pointing exactly where I want to go. And I know I've got it set, we'll say 100 feet. So I'm like, okay, that's my exact line. I got to go about 80 feet. Throw it out there. I'm going to hit that rock pile dead nuts right on the spot every time. As long as your frame of reference, your visual frame of reference for casting distance is good, you've got that down. Left or right, it's really, really hard to miss. As long as you line that thing up and fire right on line with where you were pointing it to begin with. I owe the majority of my big fish to 360 above and beyond anything else I've used for technology in my boat, because of my ability to accurately cast that and pick apart deep water structure like what we're seeing on this for this one example. That's where it's worth its weight in gold. Ooh, 603. That's a really, yeah, Gordy, that's a great question. I'll come back to that in a minute. One more for side imaging. I mean, really, this is just another example with a different color palette of what you could be looking at. This is a little bit busy. It's short range. He's only got it to 60 feet, whoever created this. There's not a lot of empty black space in the middle, so this person is pretty shallow. But what I see is a lot of wood of some kind, because there's a lot of straight structure mixed in here. A lot of straight lines with really bright, I mean, quite literally white, or even like a gray for return, with a lot of straight line black shadowing behind it. But this person's like parked right on top of it. This is not the best color palette that I would pick to be able to really visualize what's going on in this image. The previous screen, this color palette, I think would be better in this application for the shallow water depth. But you can see there's a couple of rocks in here. Top left, you got a very rectangular boulder. I mean, that could be something else too, because that's like, that might not be a boulder. That might be some sort of hard structure, like maybe a barrel that would go underneath like a floating dock, or just any dock of any kind. I could see being that, or one of the floating foam blocks that goes underneath it. But then if you go almost directly right of that and a little bit down, that's definitely a big rock that's mixed in the middle of this. There's probably some vegetation mixed in here too, but again, this is not the best color palette to really get details in here. I'm not sure what the best one would be other than the previous one I'd shown, but you really kind of can't go wrong with a couple other options. And that's the thing. There is no like best color palette for everything. I will change color palettes depending upon what depth I'm in and what kind of structure it is I'm trying to discern from one from the other. There's this like weird blue kind of color palette that I find helpful in some instances. I can't think of a specific one now, but I just know I've used it before. Green and blacks, like that can be really good in some cases. I really like the yellows, the reds, the oranges. Like this, for me, I find is the easiest to be able to pick apart, especially for me, where I like fishing bottom structure. And I like finding hard structure. I like rock piles. I like finding logs, things like that. This, I feel, is the easiest way to find all that. If I were looking for rocks tucked away inside of dense vegetation in shallow water, that's probably not the best color that I would go with. I'm not sure I'd go with. I'd cycle through until I found what I felt would be best. Another example, with this one, you're looking at a couple of sporadic rock and like bigger rocks, a lot of smaller rocks, and I would say even some sporadic, really thin patches of vegetation throughout. But everything is so, I don't know, like kind of not very well defined. I would guess this is more rock than anything, but I would not put it past the chance, a high chance, that there's some sporadic vegetation here. And the last one, the 360. This is a really good one that shows a mix of both hard structure in the form of a lot of timber and then bluegill beds or bream fish, whatever you want to call them. I think they primarily call them bream down south, but bluegill beds. I mean, this, if you, again, break it up into quadrants, go to the bottom left corner, but really close to the center, and you've got texture that looks like a golf ball. Best way I can explain it. And then if you go to the top left, but just above like the halfway point, top to bottom, you've got more of that kind of golf ball texture in there as well. Those are a ton of bluegill beds that are all stacked together. Those, to me, no matter what kind of sonar it is that you have, with the exception of 2D sonar, that's pretty hard. But your side imaging and your 360 bluegill beds stand out like a sore thumb. Like, to me, that's the easiest thing in the world to see. And then, again, there's a ton of hard structure here in the form of timber of some kind. Not really sure what that all is, because it's all pretty uniform in how it's all cut. But this person's also really shallow. Unfortunately, the thing's been cropped, so I can't tell exactly where or what their range is at, but they're pretty damn shallow because the black circle in the very middle underneath the little boat icon, really hard to see. Because they're dirt shallow, which makes sense. Bluegills tend to spawn pretty damn shallow. So anyway, that's what, honeycombs. Drew, that's another good way to put it. Golf ball dimples, honeycombs. Same, just different. Okay, so that's 360 in a nutshell. That leaves us with forward-facing sonar. So now, is this going to let me do this? Yep. All right, let me close that for a second. Forward-facing sonar for me is very hard to explain and visualize with a still image. It's something that I really feel to adequately understand it, you need to see it live. And I was agonizing over this as I was setting up for the stream, and I wished we had a better luck when we were fishing this past weekend, so it could have gotten better examples. As it is, I only have 2 examples. But what I'm going to be able to do is hopefully be able to pause strategically here to talk through it and really show you what it is that I look for when I'm using forward-facing sonar. The gist of forward-facing sonar, live scope, active target, mega live, pen optics, it's all the same. The quality of all of those varies greatly, especially from original generations to most current generations. And as much as I am a Lowrance guy, Garmin is still king in this realm. Lowrance Active Target 2, I'd say, is right behind it. However, I have not spent a lot of time with Mega Live 2. I would say Mega Live 1 is by far the worst. Mega Live 2, I've heard, is greatly better. Is greatly improved. I have not used it extensively enough to say either way. It might be that Active Target 2 is the worst. I don't know. I can tell you, with a lot of practice, any and all of these things can be really dangerous. The most important thing is ensuring that your transducer is perfectly spot on, dead nut straight line with whatever indicator it is that you are using to tell you where that thing is pointing. Whether it's the arrow on top of your Ghost, if you got the true arrow from Bassfish Electronics, if it's your Ultrex and the actual head is spinning around, then that's even easier because you can line those two up really well. I don't know anything about the power pole move. The Garmin, I believe the head moves on that too. So again, that one's pretty easy if that's the case. You got the new Lowrance Recon. The whole head swings around on that. That's easy. If you have a separate motorized turret like I do, it's got its own little, kind of arrow indicator on top of that. Whatever you're doing, you're just going to make sure those two are lined up, because if they're off by even a little bit, because your forward-facing sonar cone is so damn narrow at about 16 degrees, it's if you're not perfectly lined up and they're off by even a couple of degrees, then your 16 degrees becomes like 12 degrees, or 10 or 8 degrees. And it's still wider than that, but your frame of reference for accuracy gets worse and worse the farther off it is. You got to make sure these things are really lined up, or you're going to be wasting a lot of casts and spending a lot of time trying to find your friggin' bait. But the whole point of forward-facing sonar, pretty straightforward, right? It is live sonar or near live. I only have active target 1, and I'm pretty damn dangerous with it. And I am way behind the curve for what is available out there. But I can reliably see fish in like my kettle ponds. If I'm in 20 feet of water or less, I can see fish out to about 90 feet. For a really small lure, like I'm throwing like a 1/8 ounce tungsten head, which is really small, I struggle to see it. But everything you're doing with that, and anybody that's fished for a while knows what this is. You are looking for your lure more often than not and watching it come through the water to see how fish are reacting to it, or you're using it to scan areas that you think fish are going to be to try and see them. It's pretty easy to be able to decipher what it is that you are seeing as far as fish movement versus structure. It is a moving, living little blob. And if they move and present themselves just right inside of your cone angle on your forward facing sonar, you can see the whole profile of the fish and you can see their tail swishing. Now, you don't see the tail the whole way because at some point it curves just enough that the sonar is no longer pinging off it and it's not getting a return, but you can kind of see that waving action in it as like the black line kind of goes back and forth for where the tail is bending just right. The sonar can't pick it up. I don't know how else to explain it. It's cool, especially when we were doing vertical Damiki dropping for smallmouth late in the year. It's awesome watching them turn. And it's just this amorphous blob that looks like nothing. And then they come up like this, and you see the whole profile of that smallmouth. And I think it's more of that they kind of do this on their side versus pointing straight up, because you can see their dorsal fin, their anal fin, you can see their whole tail, like the whole profile, and it's really, really cool. And then they turn into a blob as they come up, and they're going after your blob, which is a lure. That's all forward-facing sonar is. As far as trying to decipher what structure is on forward-facing sonar, that's hard. That is why I still think having Mega 360 is invaluable, because the detail of what you're looking at from the top down cannot be matched. And while it's not live, it's pretty close to live as far as like bottom composition, understanding what it is that is around you, seeing it. I mean, you can crank it up. The faster your spin speed is on it, the less resolution you get on it. It's a speed of 1 through 6. I leave mine at 3. It's just fast enough. I'm not really fishing that fast that I can see everything around me, but I'm also getting really good detail on the structure. If you're looking at forward-facing sonar, so if you think back to your traditional 2D sonar, everything is just pointing straight down. Your forward-facing is literally that. It's pointing straight away from you. So as you come up to something like a rock, not a problem. That's pretty easy to see, because all of a sudden it's flat, 90 degrees, or, just hard round to it. And then you can't see anything behind it. And then you're getting bottom return beyond that. If you get a sea of vegetation, it's literally like if you ever fish pond cabbage, which is usually in very isolated clumps. And I find a lot of mine out in like 8 feet, 8 feet, 8 feet, 8 feet wall. And then there's almost nothing you can see in the middle of that. If you were to sit absolutely still and just keep your forward facing pointed into it, you will eventually see a little blob appear here and there in the little bit of gaps of vegetation that your sonar is able to ping through and return back through at the same time. So you can still see individual stalks with gaps here and there, and you're just looking for a little shimmer of a blob, and that to indicate that there's fish swimming through it. That's really, there's nothing else to it when it comes to that. But for an actual visual, this was from Lake Champlain a couple, 2 years ago? And what you're seeing here... Oh, that's perfect. So if I need this to catch up. There we are. If you go, we have two different things. If you're looking across the top, that is your distance from boat out. And then that's your numbers from, your -20 to 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120. I'm looking 120 feet out, straight out in front of me from the boat. And then on the left side, going vertical, is my depth. So I've got it set, I can't see it, down to about 50 feet. But you can see bottom, where we currently are, is about 30 feet. And there's this nice little drop of a ledge, more of a knuckle, going down to 35, maybe in like 38 feet. And there's just a little bit of hard structure right at that break. If you go to about 50 feet, so about halfway between your 40 and 60 across the top on your horizontal, and you come down, there is a little bit of that kind of hairy return. There is some vegetation there, but it's primarily rock that we were fishing in this case. And if you're just looking at the very kind of corner side edge of those rocks, you're not going to get a great return. It's going to be scattered, so it's going to almost present itself as vegetation, that kind of hairy, jagged, not so great return. But as you pan around, you'll eventually catch that rock perfectly, even if you're only skimming the top, because I am going downhill to read this, but you will see as you go pan left and right, that there is a consistency to that height at some point in there that helps indicate it's a rock. No matter what you do, if it's all jagged, it's vegetation. But now we go to about that 20-foot mark, and you come straight down. You've got 4 very distinct blobs that we can see here. You've got the cluster of 3. The one that is most to the left in that cluster of 3, that's the Alabama rig. Just below it and a little bit to the right, that's a smallmouth. And then it's fainter, but further back to the right, that's another smallmouth. And then if you come left, almost right below our feet, there's another little blob that is just barely off the bottom. That's another smallmouth. So, letting this play through, you can see where all these fish detach themselves from the bottom, and they're following our Alabama rig, and then they go right back down into that hard structure that we were trying to fish.
He likes it.
I mean, one of the biggest benefits of being able to use.
Nope, you got scared.
is, in my case, I don't go chasing fish down. I'll just let this play again while I'm talking. If I see a fish and it comes in as I'm just moving across the body of water, 100% I'm going to cast him. If he doesn't bite, but I can still see him without moving the boat, I'll throw at him again. If he moves out of my scope and he's going somewhere else other than where I was intending to go,
he likes it.
He's done. He's gone. Maybe. And I'm not going to run that fish down.
I got scared.
I don't think I have ever seen a big fish on my scope and run him down. To just be like, nope, I'm going to keep this boat moving. I'm going to follow the fish. I'm going to cast and cast and cast and cast and cast until I piss that thing off until he bites. Never done it. That's not me. I like fishing structure. As much as I want to catch big fish, I do not enjoy the aspect of running them down and just casting at them over and over. I like fishing structure. And for me, the biggest benefit of using forward facing is in instances like this, where if not for dragging this thing over, and this is a little late, but right at the beginning of the video where I started here, let me go back to the beginning. So hard pause. Here we go. Now I started filming this a little late, but we were dragging an Alabama rig from 100 feet away all the way up that knuckle without seeing a fish at all. And it wasn't until we came past the knuckle that these fish were detaching themselves off the bottom to come after.
But there is that one.
And having the forward facing gave us the confidence that, okay, we were in the right area.
Nope,
after this, we were barely using it. We just knew what we had to do. We had the cadence and the retrieve speed down to get our rigs out there, let them hit bottom, and then just 1-2 quick pumps on the handle would get it up 2 feet, and then just slow, slow, slow. And we had the weights on it and the cadence just right. And if all of a sudden it felt like dragging a little bit, just 1 quick pump, pull it up another foot, and just keep slow rolling. And at this point, casting out where it's coming up, if I felt it hit drag bottom, I would speed it up just a touch, because then I know I'm trying to pull it up over the top, and I'd slow it down until I felt a little tick on the bottom. Like that for me is the biggest benefit forward facing. It helps you to not only understand what your bait is doing and relative to the bottom, in this case, if you're fishing structure, but also just to know if the fish are even friggin' there, in instances where even if I went by this on 2D and down imaging, side imaging, if they're pinned to the bottom, you might not see those fish depending upon the bottom composition. You know, if it's a really soft, mucky, spongy bottom, they're going to blend in a lot better, and it's going to be a lot harder to decipher them that they're there. But seasonal pattern wise, knowing that this area is consistent, I knew that there was a good chance those fish were going to be there, but I wouldn't have seen that they were there without that. And then, okay, they're here. Blind cast, here we go. Now I know I can drag this area with confidence, with Jake or Ned rig, blade bait, whatever the case. So anyway, that's one example, and then one more. It's pretty much the same thing, and for the life of me, I have no idea. Is that the same file? Nope, different one. So this is a better example, right? You really can't see any fish.
Here too.
There's my 360, which is crap. Kind of
all ledge.
Not great, but it does show where we're fishing this significant drop off. So when that A-rig is going down, if I go back to, that's 16 seconds, go back to the beginning. Do you see any fish in here? None. The only thing you see is my A-rig coming down at 60 feet. Other than that, there is not a single fish present on this. So it's not like we're out here chasing down fish. I'm literally proving to you that we have no idea there's fish there. Currently at this cast, we just know that they should be there, but we don't actively see them. We're not hunting them down and putting it on their heads. We're fishing structure with our forward face.
That's all ledge.
That is what we do for 99% of the applications for this. And then, yes, every once in a while we see if they're swimming, we'll throw it at that point. But other than that, we're just we're picking it apart. Now,
was his A-rig
down there, all the
fish behind it, right on the other side of that hump.
Oh, damn. Ooh, I want to eat
3 or 4 fish back there still.
I'll just let this play out, but that's kind of the gist of it, what you're looking for. These rings, these pulses that you're seeing.
And of course, one time I pull up my phone.
That is from my Mega 360. Active target 1 is
there's a couple coming up,
like a little over 1.2 megahertz, and then Mega 360
still that other one right
is
below the boat.
Almost 1.2 megahertz. So while the frequencies do not overlap, they're very, very close. That they will cause some interference, and that's what you're singing. Is the Mega 360 ping going through the active target over and over and over and over again. You typically want at least 70 or 75 kilohertz separation between two frequencies for two transducers operating side by side, so that you don't have. Oh, wrong one. Oh boy. There we go. That took me a minute. You want about 70 kilohertz separation between the frequencies of two transducers operating at the same time on a single boat, so that you don't have the interference. It's not 100% necessary, but it does help keep everybody clean and clear. I didn't think that was going to take me an hour and a half. And I even told my wife, I was like, you know what? I'm pretty sure this is going to be pretty fast. But in this case, I think it's going to take me an hour. And here we are, an hour and a half in. And now I'm finally done. Now I can get to some questions here. And I apologize if there's... Oh, there was a good one. All right, give me a second to go back through. That's a good one. Oh, I don't want to hear that. I'm gonna take a look at that. Is that spaghetti? Into the shrubbery. Oliver, hard to see lobsters in that. Oliver's been getting on a bunch of those lobsters. All right, that's good enough. If you guys asked questions like ages ago, then come back and ask them again, because it's going to take me a long time to go back through everything. Dogbo, when an image shows up on my screen, how far out am I casting? Well, that depends. If you are looking at your 2D sonar, it depends on what frequency you're in. If you're in chirp and it's pinging the whole range of your frequency, say 83 to 200 kilohertz, it depends on how deep you are, because if you're at 83 kilohertz, your cone is wider. And the deeper you go, the more that can see. So if you're in 80 feet of water and you get a boomerang below your boat, that fish could be anywhere from right below your feet to, I think, like 20 or 25 feet away from where your trolling motor is, or that transducer. If you're using one on a trolling motor or transit mount, wherever it is, they could be within 20 or 25 feet of it. Now, if you were on 200 kilohertz, so much more focused, your cone angle is much smaller, so your diameter of your sonar is much smaller at the bottom as well. And say you're only 20 feet, that fish is pretty much at your feet, right? You can just drop that straight down. If you're talking about forward facing, that's where it gets a little bit tricky. One of the things I do know is your distance out to distance down, you want that ratio to be 2 to 3x of out over down. So I go well beyond that, and that screws with the overall perception of distance that you're casting. Where if I'm running like 100 out and 20 feet down is the extreme that I can do on mine, that's a 5-to-1 ratio. And you see a fish that's like 50 feet away and you think it's really 50 feet, but it's not. I don't know how to explain it. The distance is off a little bit, versus if I'm at 100 feet out and 50 feet down and I cast 50 feet out, I'm hitting that fish right on the head. I don't know how to explain it. I have to go out and do more research on the water to be able to adequately explain what that means. But then on side imaging, you see one, then that's straightforward. You got it out 120 feet, you see a fish at 80, that fish is 80 feet away. Regardless of where it picks up, if your side imaging is 100 feet out, and you're in 30 feet, you're not reading anything for the first 30 feet because you're in 30 feet of water. The sonar is not pinging until it hits the bottom. So even if you're in 30 feet, there's nothing underneath you see a fish at 60, it's still 60 feet away from the boat. That's just how it works for side imaging. Same with 360, regardless of what depth you're at, wherever you see a ping on that you know is a fish, say it's right on the 100-foot line and you're in 50 feet of water, that fish is still 100 feet away from you. Gordy, sorry if you already covered it, but do you adjust your settings in different water bodies if the clarity is different? That is a damn good question. And no, I don't. Clarity is both correct and misleading for how we anglers perceive clarity. There's a couple of different factors that come into play when you're talking about water clarity. It is both your turbidity and your water color and your light intensity. It's all three things, and they all really dictate what your water clarity is. Turbidity is the measure of physical particulate in the water. That could be algae. It could be stirred up sediment. It could be fall turnover that's kind of blown over the lake and pulled up all the, kind of dead and dying vegetation out of the water. A place that was chemically treated for milfoil, all the vegetation that's died and wilted, it's kind of floating through the water. That's turbidity. Then you have your light intensity, which is the overall amount of light penetration you're getting into the water. Then you also have your water color, which can all greatly impact one or another. You get a place like Potanipo Lake that is technically, it is clear water, but it's dark water, where there is not a lot of crap floating and suspended in the water, but you can't really see it because the water color itself is really, really dark. So I'm getting a little bit off track, but that all does play into it. Short answer, no. I don't really adjust my settings any differently. If I with the sole exception of if I'm in an area, a body of water that I know, again, is very turbid, there is a ton of actual physical particulate that is present, suspended throughout the water column. That's all going to show up as returns on my sonar. So I will turn my sensitivity down a little bit. But that's rare. Typically you only run into that, again, fall turnover, like right after ice out. You got stagnant water from the ice, and you got all this particulate that builds up on the weeds and vegetation that's kind of left over. And as you get after ice out, you get a lot of high wind events. It's stirring up the water for the first time. Current's kind of better, more strongly free flowing. You get rain events that have a lot of water dumping in, that's dragging in stuff from the from the shoreline. Like that will cause a lot of particulate to float through the water. Instances like that would cause really the only consistent high turbid events you would run into. Typically a lot, again, early in the year. High rain events, I would say throughout the year, really, really high wind events that can also contribute a lot to turbidity. And then towards the end of the year, you get that fall turnover where the thermocline disappears because now your top layer and bottom layer reach the same water temperature and the lake flips on itself. That can stir a lot of sediment up as well and cause very highly turbid conditions in those instances as well. Those are the only times I would ever change it. And I'm just tuning my sensitivity down a little bit to knock out the noise that all that turbidity is causing. That was a lot. Doggo and a bunch of questions. Are you running a lithium battery? No, I'm still running all AGMs. Lithium has still not come down anywhere close in price for me to consider doing that. My AT1 gets blurry at 50 to 60 feet. What you and I have talked about this a lot, and I still cannot figure out what the solution would be for you, because like in good conditions, good water clarity, in the sense of low turbidity, man, mine is like crystal clear with its 60 feet down and 130 feet out. And I can see a 3.5 inch minnow and a 1/4 ounce ball head out to 120 feet on my AT1, my active target one. I don't know, man. I know you and I have talked about this a lot, and we need to continue to figure out what could be causing that. Rick Fuller, is there a way to get Ghost 360 to start its scan clockwise instead of counterclockwise, as I am right-handed? That is a damn good question. I would say if you reach out to Lawrence, I know their customer service is pretty good. There's a good chance someone can reach out to you and get you an answer for that. Or you can reach out to Steve at Bass Fishing Electronics. Shoot them an email or maybe even hit them up on any of their social media. They might know that answer as well. Dogbone, this was the one I really want to talk about. 2D rule of thumb is cone is 3 times your depth. Not necessarily at all. Depends upon what frequency you're using and what depth you are at. It's funky. Alec, I got skunked Saturday too. Probably my last trip of the year on the boat. Hoping for warmer temps after the extended forecast so I can get out again. Drag your butt down to Candlewood before they drop the water down, man. You can get in there. Worth it. You'll like it. Promise. Mother-in-law. Hi, Linda. Dogbone, I have a ghost and run chirp most of the time. Yeah, I mean, I run chirp on mine all the time because it, again, it's the best of both worlds where you're getting both great bottom composition, return, and clarity, detail, but also getting a really wide throw. So especially for me, where I like fishing deep water a lot, I can see a lot. So I'm more likely to pick up a fish that's swimming relatively close to the vicinity of underneath my boat. Especially if they're kind of coming up from behind it, that my forward facing will obviously never pick up because I'm never looking backwards with it. Rarely, usually looking forward or sideways. So that's chirp is just the way to go, in my opinion. Drew, thank you very much, man. Have a good night. I tell you what, this has gone on way longer than I thought it was going to. I'm glad I did it. I'm going to do my best to try and do a condensed version of this for another video that I can just put up on the channel. And I'll figure out how to go about doing that. I still have to finish the Bass Nation Championship. That video, we had a good day at Candlewood. I have a lot of editing ahead of me that I need to get done at some point. But for now, I'm going to go sleep off this headache and I'll figure out another night to do all that. So for everybody that's here still, thank you very much. I wasn't sure how well this would go. It's kind of nerdy, but for me, it's a really good off-season topic for anybody that has never gone this far down into reading and understanding what your sonar is telling you from every different kind. Forward facing is kind of straightforward. All the other stuff, I really hope I was able to explain this in a way that made sense for you to understand. Maybe taught you guys something new. I really appreciate you all sticking around. Do me a favor, if you haven't done so yet, please leave a like, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, it doesn't matter. It always helps. For everybody that did share this, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I don't know what we're doing next week, but we'll be back next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. As always, youtube.com/@RealNorthernBass or Facebook.com/RealNorthernBass. Either place, the live stream's there every week. Everybody, thank you very much again. You'll have a great night and